Hello and welcome to Empire of the Cop Insider. I'm Farrell Keeling and we've got the eternally lovely Neil Jones here with us yet again this week. The football is back and thank God we've got a Liverpool win to talk about. Not quite the convincing start, Neil, but a much better end to the first half and certainly a huge improvement on the second half to produce that 3-1 win against Bournemouth. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I did a podcast with the Anfield Wrap on Friday, and one of the things that I sort of said in the podcast, you talk about a lot of things in the build-up to a game, and I said I'd quite like to see Liverpool answer a few questions in the game. Not a little bit. I didn't want them to win 9-0, but you sort of want them to have a little bit of adversity and come through it and sort of actually sort of convince themselves as much as the fans. And in that sense, I think they did a little bit. They had adversity in the game. Obviously, two big moments in the game where it could go wrong, couldn't it? You go 1-0 down in the first couple of minutes, and then you go down to 10 men when the game is very much in the balance. And I thought Liverpool reacted to both of those things really well, and that's something that maybe we wanted to see from them. They wanted to see that they can, they don't sort of spiral into this, sort of team that we saw last season where things get away from them early in a game and they can't pull it back, or that they have a setback and they sort of fall apart. So in that sense, I think there was a lot to like about the game. Obviously, you don't want to be giving teams a goal start, and I mean, let's be fair, it could have been more than a goal start the way that Liverpool began the game. And you'd still like to see them look a little bit more or a little bit less open. The goalkeeper's obviously made a couple of saves late on. There's a couple of chances that Bournemouth might have taken that might have made it a bit more nervy. But I think overall, and I think crucially, I think individually in terms of the players, I think you're seeing a lot of players in form, and you're seeing a team that's starting to figure itself out and figure each other out. And I do think we can expect Liverpool to get better as these opening weeks sort of are negotiated. And yeah, I think Saturday was a step forward. And if you look around, you look around the league. Chelsea yesterday lost, Manchester United lost on Saturday. Arsenal played tonight. Newcastle have been beaten already, so Liverpool are already sort of above par probably for 2 games in. I know that sounds ridiculous. So it's not been the worst start as it to the season. I think I was quite positive after Chelsea, and I'm even more so after Bournemouth.
I think it was a really, really quite impressive start from Bournemouth. I think perhaps more of a difficult game than most might give it credit for. And then, you've got to look as well the context of sort of Chelsea game. A point at Stamford Bridge. I think it's been discussed. It's not a bad thing, is it? I think, and I'm sure certainly as the season goes on and Chelsea improve and their new signings fit in. We'll look back on that point a bit more favourably than we are sort of currently. I want to talk about the new boys. Specifically, not so much our most recent signing, and Endo. We'll get to him shortly, but we'll go chronologically here. Obviously, there's the major talking point with the Alexis McAllister red card. But I want to start off with Szoboszlai's performance in particular. It looked like a real sort of force of nature, sort of driving forward. We've already seen plenty of clips online of that run where he sort of smokes 2 Bournemouth defenders in the process. But I think perhaps what will be the standout sort of factor, and certainly what would appeal to Jurgen Klopp looking back through the footage, would have been perhaps how seamlessly he fitted into that sort of traditional Henderson role, dropping back to support the fullback. I mean, dare I say it, with all due respect to Naby Keita, it looks like we've signed something of an upgrade in the number 8 position.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, listen again, not to bring Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain, but someone did mention that to me that Liverpool haven't really had a player like him since Oxlade-Chamberlain was maybe in his that short-lived purple patch before his injury. When he was driving from midfield and shooting from outside the box and had that real physical sort of power to him. And Szoboszlai, obviously looks 2 games into the season, and of course you've got to remember that you just mentioned Keita there. I mean, I remember his first couple of games and there was a lot of excitement around him, and he never quite sort of kicked on from there, did he? But Szoboszlai, I think what stands out for me more than anything is that sort of mix of talent and silky sort of on the ball work with just what looks like a natural desire to work hard and a strength and a physicality to go with it. So there's a lot to like about him, most definitely. I mean, he does a lot of his work on that right side, doesn't he? You know, if you look at his sort of touch and heat maps, and he is very much in the Henderson position, if you want to call it that, as a midfielder, but he plays in a completely different way. You know, he's far more happy to have the ball with his back to play and to play one touch and to sort of, you know, to link, and he can carry the ball. I think what would have impressed Cheick, and I think it did impress Cheick, and he mentioned it in his press conference, was sort of when Liverpool went down to 10 men, they obviously needed everyone to give a little bit extra. And in fairness, everyone did, but it felt like he got stronger. You know, it felt like he sort of stepped up and said, right, okay, this is me then, isn't it? I'm going to have to do the work of two people. And, you know, he really sort of took the fight to Bournemouth, obviously, you know, was involved in the third goal, really kept getting Liverpool to the edge of the box and around the box, didn't he? And, you know, into dangerous positions. And I think that speaks to his character, doesn't it? You know, he's the captain of Hungary for a reason. He's only 22. It does feel like Liverpool have signed someone who's got an awful lot of ticks in the box, doesn't it? He feels like a Liverpool player, but he also feels like a Liverpool crowd player as well. He feels like someone that the crowd will really sort of relate to and enjoy, because he's not frightened to get his hands dirty. He's not just a sort of a luxury player who likes to, you know, be there when the ball is around him. He actually wants to go and win it back. He wants to go and fight for it, and he wants to go and carry it as well to the opposition.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's quite interesting because I was at the Darmstadt game, and I remember sort of watching him and thinking, a bit easy to sort of knock off the ball. I think, you know, it was very much, everyone was sort of looking at the contrast between McAllister and Szoboszlai, thinking, oh, this lad's going to take a bit of time. You know, we'll keep with him, of course. We spent the money. He's certainly got that talent. But it's been quite the contrast, even these opening two games. The improvement has been sort of clear for all to see. Speaking of McAllister, unfortunately, I mean, I think Klopp also said after the game, because I think reporters were keen to sort of, you know, talk about Szoboszlai. I think Klopp went, well, hang on, McAllister actually had a pretty good game himself before the red card incident. Two things, really. I want to get your verdict. I think everyone's sort of spoken about on the issue and how nonsensical it seems. So I want to get your sort of point of view on that sort of red card call, and also beyond that, really, because it seems Liverpool will appeal that decision. How likely are we to succeed in that endeavour?
I'd say unlikely, probably. Just given the way it works. I mean, it wasn't even taken to a review, was it, by the VAR, and that suggests that they'll back the referee in that regard. It was one of those where, when it happened live, obviously you're a little bit excited, because it looked like it might have been one that McAllister could get to first, and if he does, then obviously Liverpool had the ball in a good position. But you saw it when they collided, and to be honest, my first reaction was, oh, like that you know, that could be a bad one, because you saw the way Christie went down, you saw the type of sort of challenge it was. It wasn't malicious, but it was one that you could definitely get hurt, you know, going into or being on the end of. And then obviously the red card comes straight out. So I was sort of waiting for the replay, expecting to see that McAllister had been like sort of halfway up the shin and, you know, caught him, and you think, well, you can't really argue with that. And when he saw it back, you thought, it's one of those where you have to have. I think you have to have a little understanding of what malice and dangerous is, really, and I don't think either of those players really wanted to go into that challenge. I think both of those players sort of knew that they couldn't pull out, and they've both sort of done pretty much the same thing, haven't they? In terms of, you know, they've gone inside foot, sort of a yard or two off the ground. And one's just nicked the ball first and kicked through. And obviously, you know, he's caught one, absolutely a painful one for Ryan Christie. But I think if that's given us a yellow card on the field, which it probably should have been, well, it definitely should have been, I don't think that gets upgraded on a VAR review to a red. But once he's given the red card, I think it's obvious that they were never going to call him back and say, no, you've got that wrong. So by that end, I think Liverpool will be probably wise to not. Well, no, I wouldn't say wise not to, but I wouldn't be expecting Liverpool to win an appeal on that. I'd be expecting them to gather round and support the referee. But it's a huge blow, and I think you're right to mention that what Jürgen said about McAllister. You know, he said he also had a really good home debut, just didn't last as long as Szoboszlai's, and he's also, I think he quietly
and it's in far from ideal circumstances as well, given that he's playing out of position. He's really sort of shown his worth, I think, McAllister already, and I think once you can get him sort of a bit further up the field, and imagine him playing where Gakpo was playing in the first couple of games, I think you'd see a much more sort of just complete Liverpool side. I would say, you'd see him sort of doing those, like we saw in pre-season, where he plays those final passes, in and around the box, where he plays those 1-2s, where he gets into the number 10 position and sort of finds space. He's brilliant at that. He's brilliant at doing it in the number 6, because he's so reliable in his touch and his first pass, but he's too far away from sort of the danger area, if you like, when he's doing that. So he's done well with what he's been asked to do. But there's a lot more to come from McAllister when he plays further forward, and it would be a shame now, obviously, that it will be a shame if and when he gets this suspension that's going to cost him a little bit of rhythm. And we saw it last year, didn't we, with Darwin Núñez? It cost him, I think, quite severely. When you look back on the season, I think that really did set Núñez back, because you think Liverpool went to Old Trafford just after that, and you think, imagine he gets a goal in that game. They play Crystal Palace, they play Bournemouth and win 9-0. You think, God, probably gets a hat trick in that game. There's a real chance. There was a real chance for him to get some momentum early in the season. It was taken away by his own stupidity. I think McAllister's a different situation. It's not stupidity. It's just a bit of bad luck, I think, and maybe, a bit of bad officiating as well, and a bit of, a lack of appreciation of the game there, a little bit from the officials. I think they've seen sort of, a kick on the ankle, as opposed to, do you know what, that's two players honestly going for the ball and sort of, having to go for the ball, and one of them just coming off a little bit worse than the other.
I mean, I don't want to get sort of too bogged down in this, but it's also, it's going to be difficult to avoid kind of questions and scrutiny, especially when you look at who was in the VAR room, Paul Tierney and Konstantin Hadzikis. Could there be two worse suspects, behind the scenes? I mean, I don't want to point fingers too much and question integrity too much, but if you were looking at the two officials you absolutely did not want from a Liverpool perspective, who have a history of, should we say, questionable decision making as far as Klopp, and certainly I imagine Andy Robertson will feel, and Liverpool in general, it's hard, I think, from a Liverpool fan's perspective, to not feel a little bit aggrieved and a little bit sort of hard done by.
I was going to say, what I would say is, obviously Liverpool got a cheap penalty in the game, and that's one that, and I know there are people who really believe that there are these agendas against the club and this and that. And listen, it would be natural if Paul Tierney and Konstantin Hadzikis were on heightened alert when they refereed a Liverpool game, because of all the publicity and the furore that's been around them in the past. But really, I think the referee gave the red card after all. He showed the red card straight away, and if his thinking is, no, I know he didn't catch him that hard, but his foot was up and his studs were showing, and that's it. The VAR is not there to say, no, his foot wasn't up. Well, it is, but his foot was. So he can't. I don't think you can pin it on the VAR. I think maybe they could have said, come and have a look and reassess. But I think the same applies with the penalty, doesn't it? I think a lot of people would have said, listen, that's given at the other end. I think a lot of Liverpool fans are saying, why wasn't that sent to the screen? Because that's an exaggerated contact. It's minimal. And I think it's another good example as well. I saw quite a good thing where it said it's almost, it shows the ridiculousness of the penalty area almost, because it's not an offence that's worthy of a penalty, basically a goal. It's so sort of innocuous, because it's on the corner of the penalty area. It leads to a penalty, which is pretty much a goal. So I think Liverpool got the benefit of a questionable decision with the penalty. They got the wrong end of a questionable decision with the red card, and it's he was on VAR yesterday as well, Paul Tierney, wasn't he, with the Chelsea game, I think, against West Ham. So he's had a overtime this weekend. He's earned a bit of money this week, and I think I think it was a penalty that was overturned, wasn't it, with Nicholas Jackson, was it, when he went around the goalkeeper, and it was pulled back for offside, and there was obviously penalties at both ends. another penalty, late in the game with Caicedo. So he's had a busy week, Paul Tierney, but he tends to, doesn't he? Tends to have those.
Oh, certainly. It does seem to follow him, doesn't it? You mentioned Caicedo. We'll get to that shortly. I do want to touch on Wataru Endo. We were talking of players who have made a positive impression. I think what certainly stuck out for me, certainly in the crops of the post-match press conference comments, he made very clear he had a conversation with him the morning of the game to sort of briefly discuss tactics, briefly discuss his role on the side. He sort of said, look, not in any of those discussions did a 4-4-1 come into play. Very much thrown into the deep end, but you look at sort of his stats, from that sort of debut, and it's an 88% pass success rate, 2 clearances, an interception. No one's saying that he's set the world alight, but I think bearing in mind the context around the game, I think that's a pretty sort of impressive start for a player who's just come into sort of a new league and has sort of been tasked with, right, we're down to 10 here. Let's not let's try and preserve this win.
Well, the first thing I would say is, wasn't it nice to have a defensive midfielder that you could turn to in a situation like that? You think about it, Liverpool went down to 10 minutes at Stamford Bridge last week. Okay, Curtis Jones probably would have come on, but that would be Curtis Jones probably playing that position for the first time in the Premier League. First time in his professional club career, should I say. You would have had James McConnell as your second midfield substitution, an 18-year-old who's never played professional football. So you've got a Japan international, the captain of Japan, the captain of Stuttgart to turn to. That's first of all, that's a bonus. So listen, it might not be the player that everyone expected, and you and I have talked many, many times about holding midfielders and who you would like and what type of player. And I don't think we ever came towards anyone who was 30, let alone someone who's playing for Stuttgart in the Bundesliga at 30. So still, that was a bonus, wasn't it? That Liverpool had him in their pocket. Obviously, I think they'd have much preferred it to be 3-1 and Liverpool had 11 men and Endo could come on for a much more sort of serene debut and introduce himself. But in a way, I think it was quite good that he got to come on and play his game a little bit, didn't he? In the sense of, what's his strengths? Okay, his strengths are defending, his strengths are winning the ball, and being good in the air. There was one really good header from his own box, which I thought that was quite encouraging, that he was in the right place to start with, but he got good distance on his header, and he was sort of, that'll be a bonus for Liverpool to have someone like that who can offer a bit more protection and a bit more sort of presence in the box at set pieces and things like that. So it was a low key. I think you have to give him a pass. That he's. We spoke to him after the game in the mix zone. I stopped him. We had an interview, and he said he was preparing, on Tuesday for Bundesliga football, against their Bochum at home. Stuttgart, they won 5-0 on Saturday. He said he was preparing for that game. And then obviously, as the week's gone on, he's ended up sort of getting his head around the fact that he's going to be playing at Anfield in front of 51,000 in the Premier League in a game where they're down to 10 men. And it's sort of, it's going a bit chaotic and a bit end to end. So you have to give him a pass on that, he's learning a new sort of life. He's only had one training session with his teammates. He only got his international clearance on Saturday morning. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I think also you just have to, what it's like, just to peek behind the curtain a little bit. But you've been moving house. I've been, we've all been away on holiday. We've all gone through those things. It takes it out of you, doesn't it? That sort of those kind of things. And imagine uprooting your life from Germany to England and sort of going through medicals and sort of all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, right, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? Where my family going to come over? That kind of thing. Of course, it's going to be a sort of a stressful week. So I think you've got to give players a little bit of leeway in that regard. I don't think you could expect too much from him, but what we got from him, I thought was pretty standard and pretty encouraging from a Liverpool point of view. He looks to me like he's someone who's going to be quite reliable, if not spectacular.
A sign of things to come, certainly. I think we've discussed the Chelsea game already. We've discussed Moises Caicedo already, and I think the contrast certainly in those two games, the Chelsea defeat to West Ham and Liverpool's win over Bournemouth. I think no one's under any illusion, given the quality of certainly Caicedo in particular, that this will be a player that will turn good for Mauricio Pochettino. But I think it is perhaps worth pointing out the comparison in terms of how smoothly the likes of McAllister, Szoboszlai, now perhaps Wataru Endo have fit into the 11 and their sort of more or less immediate impact when it comes to the competitive league, restarting. I mean, it says a lot, I think, about the differences between Liverpool and Chelsea's recruitment, sort of the slow, patient, precise approach at Liverpool and the scattergun, just throw money against the wall and see what sticks at Chelsea.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you look at that team that Chelsea had on, you look at the subs, Mudryk and Madueke come on as subs. And they were both signed in January, and they're already out of the sort of, out of the start 11 at this moment in time. They've changed system. They now have these sort of this 3-4-2-1 sort of thing, isn't it? With got a new centre forward now, so they're gonna pin their hopes on him. They've all of a sudden, they've got the captain's injured, so that they're sort of having to sort of fit a new player in at right wing back and things like that. They're sort of having to. They've obviously spent a lot of money, so I expect Caicedo and or Lavia to sort of come into the midfield, but they're putting together a new midfield partnership. Liverpool obviously have needed to make some changes, but I think they've done it. Generally, they've done it without sort of really disrupting the sort of the core of the side, isn't it? You look, and in any given week, you're going to have Alisson, you're going to have Van Dijk, you're going to have Trent, you're going to have Robertson, Salah, Diaz. So you've got that sort of reliable core, and I think what it also says a little bit is the senior players. I think sort of set that tone at a club, and you think of if you've got a lot of new players coming into a club, and Liverpool have only got 3 coming into the side this summer at the moment, but if you've got new players, you're going to need those ones who've been around for a while to sort of really make sure that there's this kind of expectation, there's this standard, there's this training sort of culture, if you like, training ground culture. I don't think Chelsea have had that. And I heard Frank Lampard speaking about it actually on a podcast not so long ago, and he said, it sounds like sort of management speak when you say, the training ground culture or the sort of the philosophy of the club. He said, trust me, it does exist. He said I could see it just in little bits last season with Chelsea where the senior players or there's so many changes that it just wasn't there. The standards weren't there. That they weren't able to sort of they didn't going into games feeling like they were ready. They didn't feel like they were there was a togetherness in the squad, and that's the risk, isn't it, when you spend a lot of money, when you bring a lot of players in, and there's no question Chelsea have brought absolute talent. They haven't bought many bad players, put it that way, in this spending spree. They might have bought ones that might be overpriced or might take a while to settle, but they haven't bought bad players at all. But when you buy so many of them, it either takes a while for a sort of a hierarchy to appear, and maybe that you get these leaders within the squad, or people feel comfortable within the squad. And obviously, what it does then is it just creates this sort of disjointed feel. And for 45 minutes on Sunday, Chelsea were actually pretty good. They were the better side against West Ham for a long time. But you look at that and you think, well, all the praise that they got for drawing 1-1 at Liverpool last week at home, all the criticism Liverpool got on the back of it, and one's won 3-1, one's lost 3-1. One's won 3-1 with 10 men, one's lost 3-1 against 10 men. So you're looking at that and saying, well, there you go. Maybe it's sort of, it is wise to sort of just take a second, have a little bit of a wait before you start, making the assessments at the start of the season. There's still a lot of work for Chelsea to do. There's still a lot of work for Liverpool to do. But I think Liverpool are coming from a more settled and stable base. And, I think, again, nothing proves that as well as last season. When Liverpool played Chelsea at Anfield in January, I think they were 8th and 9th, the two teams. And it was, I think I definitely wrote in my piece for goal, and didn't it show? There was a 0-0 draw, which precious little quality on show. It did look like the 8th and 9th best teams in the league playing. But look what happened come the end of the season. Liverpool were 5th, Chelsea were 12th. And, I think it does say something for what Jurgen Klopp's got and the senior players that he's got and the culture of the club, that Liverpool were able to at least rescue something from the season, whereas Chelsea, with all the changes they made, with all the sort of uncertainty and the egos potentially that were clashing, they went the other way. And that's the challenge for Pochettino, isn't it? He's got to get them doing what Klopp's Liverpool do and sort of getting back up towards the right end of the league. And if you were asking me, listen, talent-wise, there's not much between the sides. Chelsea have got a breadth and depth of talent in their squad. But if you're asking me who I would be backing to be in the top 4 come the end of the season, it'd be Liverpool every day.
I think expectations have evolved in sort of multiple aspects. Even looking at Virgil van Dijk, I would say there's a recognisable difference in terms of his levels compared to last season. Again, I don't want to get sort of too bogged down in Bournemouth. We do have a lot to talk about, but I think you can sort of look at where Liverpool are right now and say, actually, yes, there is still a need for signings, but Liverpool are perhaps in a better situation than many fans initially were giving the team credit for. It's certainly not quite as bleak as I think we were thinking about sort of heading into the season. But we are going to talk about signings inevitably, as we always seem to do this week. And it seems we're going to have to adapt our expectations around what kind of individual will follow in next after Wataru Endo. I believe James Pearce wrote an article to The Athletic this morning noting that Liverpool won't be going for a specialist number 6 after Wataru Endo. Klopp very much views Endo not as a stopgap. He's very happy with that sort of signing, and Liverpool will now be looking for more of a multifunctional midfield operator, which I think is quite interesting, actually, because it almost brings Liverpool full circle to the names that we were initially looking at, the likes of Khéphren Thuram, Manu Kone, positionally versatile, both 22 years of age. The kind of signings you look at and think, oh yeah, we could really mould those. Is this sort of similar to what you've been hearing on your end? Are there any sort of names that you believe have been sort of thrown about and sort of touted who would smoothly fit that sort of description?
Yeah, I think we've got to look at available first and foremost. And you know that Liverpool have had some problems with available players. For example, Ryan Gravenberch, for example, was one that Liverpool really liked, but wasn't available, hasn't been available. Now, if he is, then I think Liverpool would be right in the mix for someone like him. You know, like you say, Khéphren Thuram was looked at strongly. I think it was sort of, it was relayed back that once Szoboszlai had signed that was probably, you know, put the end to that. But then obviously in the meantime, Fabinho, Jordan Henderson, left. And whether that gets revisited, we'll see. I mean, he should be available. You know, he's at Nice. He's not gone anywhere. And despite rumours, you know, about other clubs being interested and things like that, a move hasn't materialised. You've obviously got people like Manu Kone, but I think probably the more interesting thing, or the other interesting thing, is what Liverpool do at the defence. And you know, we spoke on this show a few times about, would you have a midfielder, would you have a defender, would you have two midfielders, would you have a defender and a midfielder? What would you do? I think you have to look at Liverpool's defence at the moment and say it's short in the event of injuries, isn't it? You know, you saw Joe Gomez come on at right back again on the weekend. You saw obviously Konate and Van Dijk, most definitely now the preferred centre back partnership. But what happens if one of those is down? You've got Joel Matip, who, with the greatest respect, has had a poor pre-season. And then you've got Kostas Tsimikas, who wasn't even trusted. He wasn't trusted when Andy Robertson struggled at Stamford Bridge to come on at left back. He wasn't trusted the weekend to come on at left back. He came on as a sort of advanced left side midfielder. So I think you would have alarm bells around Liverpool if injuries started to hit the defence, I would say. So would Liverpool look to get a young centre back in who can sort of, you know, maybe a player who's able to play as sort of in a back three almost, or even just as a specialist right back as well. I think there's a case for that, definitely, for Liverpool. I think midfield has been the area we've all spoken about. But you look, Bajcetic was back on the bench. Thiago should be back. I saw him walk through the mix zone, and he was very positive and sort of chirpy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in the squad next week. Obviously, Curtis had an injury at the weekend, Curtis Jones, but I think he should be okay. You know, soon enough. You've got Harvey Elliott, obviously, still. So you've got numbers at least in the midfield area. You know, assuming people stay fit, and you know, assuming that you can integrate Endo into the side and get him to a position where he's going to start. I think he's going to start at Newcastle, isn't he, with McAllister's suspension. Defensively, probably the sort of the wardrobe looks a little bit bare, doesn't it? I would say. So maybe there's a case for both.
I mean, it leaves us an interesting place, because we saw, I think, of recently as last week, there was a lot of chatter around Liverpool moving in for Crystal Palace's Cheick Doucoure. That now seems to have somewhat cooled, and if it's indeed the case that Liverpool are looking for more multifunctional operators in the middle of the park, is it fair to say then that we can expect Liverpool to not move at all for the likes of a Doucoure, and certainly for Amrabat, who seems to be bizarrely consistently linked? I'd be mightily surprised if Liverpool went anywhere near Amrabat at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out, because if we've seen this summer, as I say, we all, no one saw Endo coming, no one saw Szoboszlai coming, did they really? Until it was sort of a done deal. But it would feel a bit strange for Liverpool to buy a 30-year-old hold midfielder, and sort of on a 4-year contract, and then also go and buy a 23-year-old in Doucoure or a 26-year-old in Amrabat. It would feel like it would feel like sort of double locking the door, wouldn't it? A little bit, and maybe that's what some fans would like Liverpool to do. But yeah, it would feel a little bit sort of extreme from Liverpool's point of view. It looks like they've committed to Endo as being not just a sort of squad player, sort of emergency sign. I'm not for one second suggesting that he was always the guy that they wanted, but I think they've seen him as someone who's first team capable. I saw someone commented on my Substack at the weekend, actually, that said, I was worried about him being another Arthur Melo. He said, but he's already played more minutes than Arthur Melo for Liverpool, so we can rule that one out. Yeah, I think it does give Liverpool a bit more wiggle room, doesn't it, to get someone a bit more longer term, I think, and a bit more sort of suited to the future of Liverpool, or, and this isn't a popular one, but to do some work for future. So if you look at maybe someone like who's been linked, Andre, for example, from Fluminense, and there's talk that when Liverpool aren't going to get him this window, well, maybe Liverpool can put a deal in place for January that he arrives, and they can make sure that that's all set up. Maybe they can start to put some groundwork in for the next sort of big player that they think is going to become the next Moises Caicedo type of thing, in a year's time or whatever. They can start to sort of make some headway in that regard, because they've got Endo in, and he can sort of look after the fort for the time being. But I definitely think Liverpool are still short of a player, probably two players, before the end of the window. I think Jurgen said on Friday in his press conference, he said we are still looking at the market and we will see. So there's definitely a chance that Liverpool are doing more business, and I think they need to. They still need, I would say, another midfielder, probably a player who's capable of playing a couple of positions in the midfield, but I think also definitely a centre back. I think they can't risk Canate or Van Dijk getting injured and having to sort of put Matip and or Gomez into the side for 3-4 weeks or more. I think it's just it's too big a drop off, and there's too many question marks around it. And also, those two players have shown that when they do play regularly, they tend to break down as well. So you could find yourself pretty quickly in a position where you're running out of centre back options.
I mean, it's very reminiscent, isn't it, of sort of the 2021 season? And you're thinking, everyone's looking at that situation thinking, this looks dodgy. This could, an injury, and inevitably it happened. And then you look at sort of the options Liverpool were exploring at the time. Ocean Kabaka, obviously still something of a cult hero, albeit at Liverpool, but not to the standard that I think certainly Liverpool wanted, and evidently, as why we didn't pursue that on a more permanent deal. I do think it's interesting that whilst we are sort of talking midfielders, generally there doesn't seem to be a great deal of chatter about centre backs and about a left-sided sort of centre back. From your end and what you've been hearing, is this still a piece of business that Liverpool are confident of completing before the window closes?
No, I wouldn't say confident. I have not been given that sort of impression. It's always been put to me that if Liverpool sign a centre back this summer, it needs to be a younger player that's happy to sort of not play, or to risk not playing for long periods of the season. And so when you're looking at, for example, take the finances out of it, but looking at Josko Gvardiol, that was the risk, wasn't it? He plays in Virgil van Dijk's position, so Virgil van Dijk is going to play every time he's fit this season for Liverpool in the Premier League. It's not going to, unless Liverpool have won the league by 20 points come April, Virgil van Dijk's going to, if fit, going to start 38 Premier League games, I'm pretty sure, this season. I think that Ibrahim Konate won't be far off that if he was to stay fit. So it's got to be a player that's capable of playing when needed, but is also happy to sort of develop and take that year of, okay, I'm going to have to earn my place, or I'm going to have to wait my turn. I'm going to have to maybe fill in, the odd time at left back or right back, coming on as sub, or, be one of those players that, a little bit. I mean, Kanate had to do that a little bit, didn't he, in his first season? He didn't play many league games, I don't think, up until sort of the springtime. But it needs to be something like that. It's not necessarily going to be Liverpool going out and spending £70 million on a centre back like Guardiola, who's going to expect, well, I'm going to be in the sides. It has to be. There has to be a sort of a phased introduction, if you like, and that's difficult, isn't it? It's easy for me to sit and say, oh, that's what Liverpool need to do. It's harder to look and see players that want to do that and are good enough to do it. But that's Liverpool's job. That's what they need to find. I think I'd expect Jarell Kwanzaa to go out on loan before the end of the window. Obviously, they've already sent out Reece Williams, Sepp van den Berg, so there's not a young centre back really that's ready to step into that role. I don't think as the fourth or fifth choice centre back. So if they could find one in the market, that would be pretty advisable. What I would say is, obviously, there's a young player with the under-21s, Luke Chambers, that I'm looking at him longer term. And I watched him play for the 21s last Monday against Everton. He played on Friday. He's had an Achilles injury, so he wasn't part of the first team picture this summer in pre-season. But he's back fit now. He's a left-sided centre-back / left-back. And I think he's got huge potential. I really do. I think he's one of those players that in a year or two's time, if he can go and carry on the upward curve, I think he could be ready to play for Liverpool. I really do. So if he can get a good loan maybe this season and sort of go and get some first team experience, he's had a little bit last season up in Scotland. If he can go and get a little bit more and a little bit of more physicality and experience of physicality, I think Liverpool might have a player that could seamlessly sort of come into the first team picture as either a left back or a left-sided centre back. So keep an eye on him for the longer term, but I think in the shorter term or the more medium term, I think Liverpool need to get someone in that's versatile, young, and good.
I mean, when we talk about the back line, I mean, it's you feel Liverpool have been slightly unlucky here because they did do their due diligence in part by bringing in, as far as the right sort of fullback is concerned, bringing in Calvin Ramsey, who unfortunately I believe had another injury on loan. I think the lad really can't catch a break. But I think I completely agree. I think two bodies should hopefully be the minimum target for Liverpool this summer. Again, it's determined by availability. We know the club has the finances, and you'd think any midfielder they bring in probably won't cost as much as a Moises Caicedo at this point, you'd hope. Just one final curveball I'm going to throw at you, Neil. There's been some reports that surfaced, again, inevitably, around Saudi Arabia and Mohamed Salah. Some have boldly suggested the Egyptian would be open to a move away next summer. We know certainly for this summer, his agent has been particularly vocal about this. This is not something him and his clients have discussed for this summer. We know that he's staying, no problem. But in terms of the following summer, are these any sort of murmurs that you've heard, or would you just kind of, would you rubber stamp any of this?
Listen, when Saudi Arabia is concerned, I wouldn't rubber stamp anything at the moment. There's so much going on, and we've seen it, haven't we, with player after player after player. I mean, just seeing Otavio moved. He was linked with Liverpool a while back, and he's sort of in his decent age, isn't he? From Porto, he's gone there. You're looking at Aymeric Laporte going. Now everything's sort of up in the air with Saudi. I think you obviously look at Salah next summer, and he's going to have a year left on his contract, and we know what happened last time. He had a year left on his contract, and the stories that emerge around that, and the sort of fuss that was made every time Rami Abbas tweeted, and it looked, and I know Liverpool really got to the stage where people at Liverpool thought that it was going the wrong way for them, and that Salah was going to leave. So there's definitely a chance that he leaves Liverpool next summer if nothing's been agreed. And Liverpool never had that on their agenda. Last time it was Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid and Barcelona, wasn't it? It wasn't Manchester City. I think it was sort of one of those clubs that were linked to Chelsea. This is now, there's the extra sort of spice, isn't it, of obviously Saudi Arabia. And I would be absolutely amazed if Saudi Arabia didn't come knocking for Mo Salah, obviously the most famous footballer in the Arabic world, isn't he? In sort of icon of African football, of Arabic football. So, of course, they're gonna want to have him to show off. And I can only imagine the kind of offers that would be made for someone like Salah. You know, he's already on incredible money at Liverpool. He's going to be offered incredible times 3 money probably by Saudi Arabia. So I do think it's an issue that Liverpool probably are going to have to at least confront or think about at some point. Hopefully not this summer. You know, I know there's still a few weeks left of the window, isn't there, in the Saudi Pro League, and that could cause some problems for clubs. Especially once the European window closes. Klopp's already mentioned that, and there's a few other players that have been linked from his squad, Luis Diaz and Thiago and Alisson Becker. I think Liverpool would be crazy to consider selling anyone else from the first team if they don't have to. But I think in the future, yeah, Salah's future is not gonna. It's not one that you can ignore. It's not one that you can sort of just say, oh no, not for sale. I think you have to start looking at it. You know, he'll be 32, 33. Come next summer, he'll have a year left. Are Liverpool going to give him another 3-4 year contract at the mad money that he ended up on? And what a Saudi Arabian club's going to offer him, because I think there is going to be a pretty aggressive move from them to get him over there.
Given how difficult this summer window has been, I'm sure many Liverpool fans will be absolutely delighted to know the next one will be just as good.
Someone said to me last week, someone on the host said, that obviously they must have just been looking on Twitter or someone said, is Alisson going? And my face just sort of went cold. You're like, what? And he's like, I've read that Saudi Arabia are in for Alisson. You're thinking, there's absolutely no world, surely, where Liverpool could sort of possibly say, oh, no, he wanted to go, so we have to. You think, God, the difficulty they've had trying to find a number 6, imagine trying to find a new number 1 or a new number 11. That would be off the charts.
Even more difficult, I think, replacing Alisson. More difficult, I would say. I'd say the options for a holding midfielder are far more present. I think Klopp was very clear on this, didn't he? Because he even referenced Fabinho and Henderson in his comments. He sort of went, well, Alisson could probably play for another decade. Henderson and Fabinho, not so much. You can see where the manager's coming from, and I think certainly also if you look at Alisson himself, I think you just think you've got so much still left to accomplish. With all due respect to the Saudi Pro League, within sort of European football, but. You never know. Again, we didn't know about Henderson and Fabinho, did we? I don't think anyone predicted that curveball coming. So I'll be careful not to jinx things any further. Neil, you've been a superb sport as always, and I'm sure everyone will be very keen to keep track of everything that you're writing as ever on your Substack at neilj.substack.com. All superb stuff. Lots of good stuff there. So keep a good eye on that, and of course. You'll be Xing, posting. I'm just going to tell you, it's hard to know what is it for. You'll be on X as ever at Neil Jones Goal. So keep track of that. If you've been watching this with Empire, we have this on our YouTube. Be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and a comment if you've been enjoying this kind of content. And of course, we'll be posting this on our own Substack at Empire of the Cop. empireofthecop.substack.com. Be sure to give us a subscribe there and keep track of all the good stuff that's coming out on a weekly basis. I've been Farrell Keeling. We've had the lovely Neil Jones here with us today on Empire of the Cop Insider. Hope you've enjoyed it. Take care.